everybody? Welcome back to the Red Dead character analysis. We're back here. This has been a little while since the last episode, but I'm just trying to stay consistent. To be honest with you, we're almost wrapped up with Red Dead 2 character analysis, and just the Red Dead character analysis round in general. And we're very close to be moving on to the next game, but I just kind of want to make sure I got all the bases covered, kind of like I was saying in past videos, but still make sure I have all the bases covered and get all the characters I want to, talk about, covered and whatnot. Today we're going to be doing Strauss. He's a very interesting character. He plays a small part, but also a very big part because, in hindsight, he was the one. If you really think about it, he was technically the one who got Arthur tuberculosis by sending him off to beat, the debtor, and then Thomas Downs ended up getting him tuberculosis. Arthur, so he plays a huge part in kind of how the story plays out, and he was the one who kind of pushed Arthur to go and, of course, collect the debt and whatnot. So he plays a big part, but he also plays a small part. So it's kind of either or. So I figured I would cover him here today. He's a pretty important character, kind of like I was saying, how he kind of sent Arthur off, and he played a big factor in Arthur's tuberculosis, and ended up him dying and whatnot. So he's a pretty big character in terms of storyline. But yeah, we're just gonna get right into it here. Of course, all my info from the Red Dead Wiki. A little bit of a background for Strauss. Strauss was born circa 1846 in the poverty of the city of Austrian Empire. By the age of 12, his brother was already a petty crook, beating, trying to read this here. Excuse me. But beating night watchmen for food scraps. Strauss's father sold his youngest, a 9-year-old named Anna, away into a bonded labor in order to provide for the rest of his family. Breaking her brother's hearts due to his health problems, Leopold was sent off to the United States with his uncle at 17, landing right in the middle of the New York City draft riots of 1863. The fiery, hellish-looking sight of war-torn Brooklyn gave Strauss' uncle a fatal heart attack, leaving Leopold all alone in unfamiliar land. After running illegitimate scams for years, Dutch Vanderlyn picked up Strauss and inducted him into his gang, where he became the group's accountant and eventually started up a loan sharking business. So that's pretty much the background. Then we're going to be getting into the events of Red Dead Redemption 2. So in the Horseshoe Overlook chapter, soon after the gang arrives at Horseshoe Overlook, Strauss goes into Valentine and starts up his loan sharking business, kind of getting back on track after the mountains. He asks Arthur to collect money from 3 debtors, Chick Matthews, Mr. Roble, and Lily Millet. Soon afterwards, Strauss gives Arthur the name of another debtor, Thomas Downs. During the confrontation with Mr. Downs, Arthur learns that he and his family are destitute and simply have nothing to give. Along with the fact that Thomas has tuberculosis, disappointed, Arthur leaves the ranch and reports to Strauss that his visit was fruitless, as well as telling him that he was a fool to lend them the money in the first place. Thomas's wife Edith may show up at camp later, cursing Strauss and informing him that her husband has died. Strauss was unmoved by this and simply bequeaths, I think that's how you say that word, I kind of messed that up, but the debt to Edith, who leaves the camp in distress. Alongside John Marston, Strauss is briefly taken hostage in Valentine by Leviticus Cornwall's private guards, who once Dutch brought to justice for robbing his train. In the ensuing gunfight, Leopold is shot in the leg and has to be carried to safety by the other gang members, which you'll see in some gameplay later in this video, perhaps. Moving on to the Clemens Point chapter, Strauss gives Arthur 2 names of the men he needs to collect money from. First one, an unemployed man named Winton Holmes, is located in the camp north of Strawberry and is unable to pay back his debt. However, he has been tracking a rare white cougar and says he plans to stay with it and use his pelt back to pay his debts. The endeavor is successful and Arthur slays the cougar, although Winton loses his life in the process. The other, Gwyn Hughes, is an undertaker and apprentice who's unable to pay back his debt. To do so, he exhumes the corpses of an old lady who is buried with a diamond brooch. With this money, his debt is repaid. Later on, as Arthur prepares to rob a bank with Bill, Karen, and Lenny, Strauss asks him to collect the last of the debt from Thomas's wife, Edith, since she had inherited the debt after his death. Arthur does so, and the debt is eventually repaid. Kind of going into the Saint Denis chapter here, Strauss asks Arthur to collect money from a fisherman named Algie Davidson. Algie tells Arthur he has the money before attacking him and attempting to kill him. After Algie is dealt with, his son Nate gives Arthur the location of the money. Strauss also assists the gang in robbing a wealthy businessman and gambler named Desmond Blythe. On the Grand Corrigan riverboat, during a poker game, he sits behind Blythe and subtly conveys to Arthur whether or not he should bet based on how good Blythe's hand is. Later, the guards are alerted due to the sound of Arthur's gunshot upstairs, resulting in Leopold escaping with Arthur, Javier, and Trelawney. When they get to shore, Arthur shows the Strauss that the Reutlinger pocket watch, who confirms that it is a genuine Reutlinger, so it's a real watch. In the Beaver Hollow chapter, Strauss gives Arthur 2 new money debtors to collect from. The first debtor is Davion Weathers, a soldier who deserted the U.S. Army. The other is Arthur Londonderry, who is a miner in Ansburg. Arthur finds Weathers on the roadside in Grizzly's East, where he's trying to fix a broken wagon. Weathers tells Arthur he can't pay off the debt in money, but Arthur can have his supplies instead. Almost immediately afterwards, U.S. Army soldiers from Fort Wallace come to arrest Arthur for desertion, resulting in he and Arthur having to fight off the group. Afterwards, a Wapiti woman reveals herself, who Weathers has entered in a relationship with, causing Arthur to regret not helping on the wagon. Weathers offers Arthur the woman's silver locket as a payment, and the player is then given a choice to either resolve the debt or accept the payment. After dealing with Weathers, Arthur goes to Ansburg to collect from Londonderry. Unfortunately, the foreman at the mine informs Arthur that Londonderry has died. But he suggests that his widow could perhaps pay back the debt. After riding to his widow's house, Arthur discovers that due to Strauss's debt, the Londonderry family have had to work many odd jobs to pay it off, and thus got themselves indebted and to many others in the process. It soon becomes apparent that Mrs. Londonderry cannot pay it off, and she cannot sustain herself or the child as it is, while also having to sell her property. Arthur then can choose to just absolve the debt or give her money in addition to this. And I think this is where kind of Strauss's storyline gets real interesting. After returning to camp, Arthur has a conscientious crisis and decides to banish Strauss from camp for ruining so many lives with his loan sharking. In addition to the fact that Strauss was inadvertently responsible for getting Arthur sick, kind of like I was mentioning, from his confrontation with Thomas Downs, of course. Despite this, Arthur gives Strauss some money to help him get on his way. Alternatively, if Arthur refuses to collect the debt, Strauss will leave the camp on his own, to which Arthur responds by saying he won't be missed. This doesn't change the dialogue about Strauss in the epilogue. The remaining gang members have differing opinions on Arthur exiling Strauss without their consent. While Sadie, Swanson, and Susan approve of the decision, Sadie claiming she won't miss him, Swanson said that it was the time, and Susan that she knows Arthur did the right thing and won't protest. Other members are far more skeptical. Micah straight gets into an argument with Arthur, claiming Strauss was too much of an asset. Bill and Tilly, meanwhile, are afraid Arthur will throw them out as well. Something he denies to the latter, but not to the former. Abigail and Pearson express disappointment in Arthur for not consulting the other members, to which he unsuccessfully tries to justify himself. Mary Beth and Jack question Arthur's motives, with him explaining himself to the former while, as usual, keeping the latter in the dark. And then, in the epilogue, when John is leaving with Charles and Saint Denis, he informs John that Strauss was captured by the Pinkertons and interrogated. He died in custody without revealing any information about the gang. John praises him for staying loyal until his death, saying he was an example of someone who is strong in ways he can't see. And then that's pretty much the end of Strauss's storyline. Of course, he died. Kind of sad, but you know how it is. Kind of getting into that. Going to go into some of the extra stuff here on the wikis. Personality: Strauss was noted to be a serious, unemotional man, which allowed him to be effective in his job as the main operator behind the Vanderlyn gang's loan sharking business. Though at times he was sarcastic with wit and humor, especially around Arthur after the events of Chapter 4, however. Leopold expresses more and more anxiety and fear for everyone's safety. Sadie notes he was a ball of nerves, or I think she said a bag of nerves, I don't know, whatever. Doesn't matter too much. To the aftermath of Saint Denis bank robbery, and during the absence of Dutch and the others while they were on Guarma. In Beaver Hollow, Leopold also expresses severe concern to Susan Grimshaw, stuttering all the while. This is because he was extremely devoted to the gang, refusing to give up any of his friends to the Pinkertons, despite being expelled from the gang and under torture. Strauss's eventual death in custody ultimately meant that he sacrificed himself for the gang, thus achieving his own redemption in the process. And kind of going into his also some more extra stuff, his appearance. Strauss is a 53-year-old man. I didn't even know he was that old, honestly. He was a lot older than I thought, but 53 years old with gray hair, long nose and big ears, thin lips, and a somewhat large mouth. He usually wears a white shirt, a light gray jacket, dark gray trousers, boots, and a pair of glasses. Sometimes he's seen wearing a dark green waistcoat instead of his gray jacket. He also wears a multicolored scarf while in Coulter. And kind of going to pick some extra quotes here, some interesting quotes I have here from Strauss himself. Quote, "Well, people who aren't desperate don't seem to be so interested in my propositions. I don't believe in absolutes, just shades of gray, compromises. Well, it turns out the pursuit of freedom is not a cheap business, not for all of us, and not for some of the locals. You know how it is. People is happy to borrow off someone like me, but more enthusiastic paying back to someone like you. It's legal work, Mr. Morgan. Debtors belong in prison, and we are doing them a favor." And this is some of Strauss's reaction to Arthur criticizing his loan sharking business. There's one more here I wanted to see. By the age of 12, my brother was beating night watchmen so we could steal some bread for us. My little sister Anna, she told into servitude by my father at the age of 9. We cried so much the day she left. Strauss about his past, and then here's actually one of my favorites. Nice watch. It's a Reutlinger, all right. And then of course that's the genuine Reutlinger watch pocket bit. So that was pretty interesting, I think. It was just some interesting quotes I kind of wanted to add on here. There's a cutscene I'm going to add in here, which I also think is kind of interesting to kind of cap off the whole video on Strauss's note. This is a very interesting cutscene, as you guys are seeing before your eyes here. I'll play it again with sound. But it's just kind of Dutch talking about Strauss, and just quite an interesting scene overall. I thought it would included in here.
Leopold, my good friend, as long as you're here, why don't you and John go make sure there ain't no funny business?
Of course. Gentlemen?
Drink?
Sure.
Nothing like talking to old Strauss to make you want to blow your own brains out. I should have left him where I found him all those years ago. Bookish little Austrian, fresh off the boat, his eyes out on stalks.
Well, I guess the Dutch Vanderlyn Finishing School has some strange graduates.
That it does. To your good health.
Thank you.
I thought that was a pretty interesting scene. Sometimes me reading quotes off the wiki don't do it a justice. Sometimes I like to include little clips from the games, just in any character analysis. But sometimes, with this Red Dead, I like to include some clips, and just sometimes it's cool. Sometimes it's cool to kind of hear it and see it. Just a little thing I just wanted to add on there. But yeah, that'll pretty much do it for Strauss. I figured it was an interesting enough character cover. Like I said, he did have a pretty big part in the story, at least in the part of Arthur getting tuberculosis. He had a pretty big part in that. I like Strauss. It's kind of a shame that he died. He was quite interesting. He had a lot of interesting quotes and moments. But he wasn't the best guy in the end. It was kind of indifferent on him. Not quite sure how to feel, but he was interesting. He was a very interesting character they had in there. And I enjoyed him, but I enjoyed some of his company at times. But yeah, that's my overall opinion on Strauss. But yeah, that'll pretty much wrap up today's video. Red Dead character analysis. Like I said, we're almost done. Just got a few more characters I want to kind of cover here, just to kind of cover all the bases and finally finish off the Red Dead series. For Red Dead 1 and 2, round of character analysis. And we'll be moving on soon. So just kind of making some finalizing plans and whatnot. And yeah, so stay tuned for that. Of course, leave a comment down below what you guys think of Strauss. Do you like him? Don't like him? Whatever it is it may be. Whatever you think happened to him. If he, or he did die, but I mean, whatever happened to him. All that good stuff. Comment that down below. Of course, for the regular stuff, feedback on the video. All the good stuff. All in the comments down below. I'll always leave it open. The usual stuff. Of course, make sure to subscribe for more content, like the video, all good stuff. Discord, Twitch, Instagram, Twitter, links in the description. Just kind of, staying active on all socials and whatnot, trying to keep up on certain things. And, yeah, so it's pretty interesting stuff. But yeah, stay tuned. I got a lot of good stuff coming, kind of on the side note there. Got a lot of good stuff coming, new series, kind of trying to plan it out and whatnot. But a lot of good stuff coming, so stay tuned. But for now, I will see you guys in the next video.